The winter of 1820 fell over Riverfield like a curse whispered through generations. Snow blanketed the earth with cruel silence, muting the cries of the land and the people beneath it. Among the icy hills and narrow roads, the Greenfield estate stood proud and cruel, towering over the rest of the town as if carved from stone and arrogance. Owned by the Callahan family for over a century, the estate stretched across endless acres of cornfields, barns, and blood-soaked soil. It wasn't just the largest plantation, it was the heart of Riverfield's misery. At its helm was James Callahan, a widowed man hollowed by grief, and his two children, Bruce and Jenna, cold as the frost that clung to the iron gates. The townsfolk whispered about them, careful never to speak too loudly. Bruce, the elder, found entertainment in the suffering of others, his cruelty legendary among slaves and neighbors alike. Jenna, his younger sister, was no gentler, beautiful and venomous. She learned from her brother how power could be draped over one's shoulders like fur. And James, he simply watched from the shadows of a home that once held love. James Callahan had not always been a ghost in his own house. Once, he had loved with the full force of a man who'd never known affection until he met Margaret. She was his arranged bride, a daughter of traders from the South, chosen not for wealth or bloodline but for her quiet nature. Their marriage began as a business transaction and became something sacred, something that rooted itself so deeply in James's being that when a snake took her life 5 years ago, it took his will to live too. Margaret had been the gentleness in the Callahan household. Her presence had softened James's harsher decisions, tempered Bruce's wild impulses, and given Jenna at least the shadow of a conscience. But with her death, the light was snuffed out. The house grew colder, the children wilder. James, once firm but just shrank into himself. He let Bruce handle the estate's operations, ignored the whip's echo from the back fields, and turned a blind eye to Jenna's whims. He buried himself in ledgers and long trips to neighboring towns, always chasing trade, always running from a house now haunted by Margaret's absence. Greenfield wasn't just a home. It was a kingdom ruled by the young and reckless, where discipline had been replaced by indulgence. Bruce Callahan, tall and broad with a cruel smirk etched permanently on his face, treated the estate's enslaved people as little more than pawns in his games. He made sport of pain, designing punishments that drew screams from the fields and laughter from the porch where he and Jenna drank imported wine. He delighted in watching men collapse under the weight of barrels, in chaining boys to the whipping post, in denying food for the smallest mistake. Jenna, though only 16, had absorbed his malice like a sponge. She mimicked him with the glee of a child playing dress-up, learning that power wasn't inherited, it was demonstrated. Together, they reigned over Greenfield like ice and fire, burning and freezing everything they touched. The other families in Riverfield whispered of the Callahan siblings with fear, disgust, and helplessness. No one challenged them, not even James. His silence made him complicit. And beneath the frozen surface of that sprawling land, something darker stirred, something waiting for a crack in the ice. The town square of Riverfield, though modest, came alive every month when the traders arrived with new wares and darker offerings. It was market day, and among the fabrics, seeds, and tools laid something far more sinister: people. The slave block stood under the old oak tree, its bark scarred from decades of injustice. That winter morning, Jenna was nearly dancing with excitement, wrapped in furs too fine for the biting cold. Bruce led her through the square, his boots crunching in the snow, eyes scanning the line of trembling figures like cattle on auction. "That one looks sturdy," he muttered, pointing at a teenage boy. Jenna wrinkled her nose. "No, I want someone soft, quiet, pretty." Her voice was sugar and poison. Then she saw her, Tina Giada, 20 years old, barely standing upright, lips trembling, eyes cast down. Her skin was a rich bronze hue, her hair falling in long black curls despite the wind's assault. She had been taken from the capital 2 weeks prior, ripped from her mother's arms, sold off like linen. Jenna's finger shot out. "That one. She's perfect." Bruce laughed. The purchase was made without bargaining. A few silver coins sealed Tina's fate. She didn't look up once. She had learned already. Hope was dangerous. Tina's arrival at Greenfield was like the wind slipping through a cracked window, unnoticed at first, but unsettling all the same. She was given 3 simple dresses, a pair of worn boots, and instructions from the head servant. Stay silent, stay obedient, and above all, stay invisible. Her room was a small cot beside Jenna's, in a chamber meant more for storage than for living. Jenna didn't care. To her, Tina was a doll to be dressed, a shadow to follow her steps. She delighted in dropping combs and making Tina crawl for them, in soaking her hem in mud just to demand she wash it by hand. Bruce would sometimes watch and smirk. The siblings found amusement in her silence. Tina rarely spoke unless spoken to. Her voice, when heard, was soft and careful. She feared everything: the strange house, the sharp looks, the cold nights. But more than anything, she feared being forgotten. Because in this place, to be forgotten meant to vanish, to die slowly. So she obeyed, swallowed her pride, and waited for the day anything might change. She didn't know that someone had already noticed her presence. And that someone was James Callahan. On a warm night in late summer, James returned from a trade trip in the nearby city of Harrow's Mill. The house was quiet, its shadows familiar but heavier than before. Thirsty from the journey, he walked toward the kitchen, barefoot and weary. That's when he saw her. Tina, in a simple linen dress, holding a jug of water, her eyes wide in fear. She gasped softly, stepping back. "Forgive me, sir. I came for Miss Callahan's water." Her voice was like honey laced with tremor. James raised his hand gently. "No need for apologies, girl. But who are you?" She hesitated, then replied, "Tina, sir. I was purchased for Miss Jenna." James inhaled deeply and slow, as if her words carried more weight than she knew. He studied her posture tense yet composed, her beauty quiet and solemn. There was something about her that pulled at the places inside him he had sealed shut. He offered a nod. "Hot night. Came for water too. Welcome to Greenfield, Tina." She blinked, surprised at his tone. No master had ever spoken to her like that. And for a moment, a spark of something unfamiliar flickered in the still kitchen air. The following morning, James sat longer at breakfast, his gaze occasionally drifting toward the hallway Jenna and Tina had walked down moments earlier. He didn't know why her face lingered in his mind. She was a servant, a girl caught in the cruel mechanics of their world. But something in her eyes haunted him. That same afternoon, he found himself passing near Jenna's wing of the house without reason. He paused near the parlor, hearing her laughter and Tina's soft footsteps behind it. The contrast unsettled him. That night, he again walked to the kitchen, hoping for sleep, but finding instead the image of Tina at the well earlier that day, lifting buckets with care, her back glistening in the heat. He cursed himself for noticing, and yet he couldn't stop. Something old and forgotten had been stirred. Not desire but awakening. Still he kept his distance. The house was filled with eyes, and even James Callahan understood the danger of feeling anything at all for someone like Tina. And yet, the danger seemed to grow quieter each time he remembered her voice, saying his name with soft, respectful sorrow. "Mr. Callahan." At the age of 16, Jenna Callahan had no interest in books, music, or etiquette lessons as most young ladies of Riverfield were expected to. Her world revolved around possession, of silk, of pearls, of control. On the eve of her 16th birthday, during one of the lavish dinners served in the candlelit banquet hall of Greenfield, she leaned close to her father, her tone casual, even childlike, and said, "I want something special this year. I want a brand new girl. Young, pretty, mine." Her request echoed through the quiet dining hall like a pistol shot. James looked at her, the fork trembling slightly in his hand, but said nothing. Her brother Bruce let out a short laugh and clapped the table. "Now that's a proper Callahan birthday wish." Jenna tilted her head with delight, imagining the girl already. Obedient, quiet, always nearby to serve, brush her hair, fetch her lace slippers. The thought filled her with anticipation. James, cornered between a haunting past and a daughter that mirrored none of her mother's gentleness, gave a silent nod. That night, alone in the study with a glass of bourbon, he stared into the fireplace, wondering when his daughter had grown so cruel, and why he felt so powerless to stop her. Somewhere deep in his conscience, Margaret's voice, soft and sorrowful, seemed to echo in protest. If this story has already stirred something in you, imagine what's still to come. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Leave your like if you felt the cold of Riverfield and the spark in James's chest. And tell us in the comments what kind of love story you'd love to see next. This is only the beginning. On the eastern edge of Riverfield's Market Square, beneath the sharp cry of crows circling above the old clock tower, Jenna Callahan walked proudly beside her brother Bruce, both wrapped in fine woolen coats imported from France. The crisp wind of late autumn licked their cheeks, but neither flinched, their expressions frozen into haughty masks. Vendors parted like waves as they passed, bowing slightly out of fear or obligation. Slaves stood in line like shadows along the wall, each marked by a small tag hanging from their necks, indicating price, age, origin, and skill. Jenna's eyes danced among them with the cruelty of a spoiled child picking out a doll. Bruce, ever the predator, leaned close to whisper, "Pick the one that'll cry the least. Easier to break that way." Jenna giggled. Her gaze landed on a girl with bronze skin and thick curls, eyes lowered, shoulders tense. The tag read, "Tina Giada, 20, seamstress, born in Charleston." Tina's heart pounded beneath the thin fabric of her dress. Her hands, bound loosely with rope, trembled slightly though she tried to still them. The sounds around her blurred into a dull roar. The clinking of coins, horses snorting, the laughter of children tugging their parents toward candy carts. She had not seen her mother in 2 months. Torn from her arms during a night raid, she had been thrown onto a cart with strangers, sold to a merchant, resold in Boston, and finally brought here. Riverfield. A name that sounded peaceful but already pressed heavy on her lungs. Jenna pointed at her and said with delight, "That one. She's pretty. I want her." Bruce motioned to the trader, and within minutes, Tina's neck tag was removed, replaced by a rough rope leash as if she were a pet. Her eyes met Bruce's briefly. Cold. No humanity. Only hunger for power. The journey to Greenfield Estate was marked by silence. Jenna chatted about dress patterns and winter balls, unaware or uncaring of the fear beside her. Tina sat in the back of the wagon, her fingers clutching a piece of fabric from her old blouse, one thread that remained of her old life. The trees grew taller as they left town, dark canopies clawing toward the overcast sky. The estate loomed like a sleeping giant, its fields golden with harvest, barns painted blood red. The main house stood like a monument to old money and older sins. Tina was led inside through a narrow servant's entrance. There was no welcome, no kindness, only orders barked by an older housemaid named Mrs. Redden, who smelled of vinegar and looked at Tina as if she were already trouble. "Here," she said, tossing folded garments at her. "These are your working clothes. You'll attend to Miss Jenna at all hours. No backtalk, no delays. You speak when spoken to." Tina changed in silence. The dress fit poorly, scratchy against her skin. She had no mirror, but even without one, she knew she looked like a ghost of herself. Gone were the soft linens her mother made, the warm smiles in the mornings. Now her days would begin with commands and end with fatigue. Jenna wasted no time in asserting dominance. She knocked over a vase and waited for Tina to crawl to pick it up. Bruce watched with his usual smirk, arms folded. They made a game of her humiliation, dropping forks at dinner, pushing her forward with light kicks to the heel. Every time she bent down, they laughed. Every time she bit her lip to hold back tears, Bruce whispered, "Almost broke her." But Tina endured. Every act of cruelty she folded into silence, storing it deep like coals under skin. James Callahan returned a week later, the smell of horse and tobacco clinging to his overcoat. His face was tired, drawn in the way that men look after years of quiet mourning. He greeted his children with distant politeness, barely registering Bruce's brash handshake or Jenna's too loud kiss on the cheek. That night the house was still. Moonlight poured through the hallways like spilled milk. James descended the stairs barefoot, craving water. In the kitchen, he found Tina bent over a basin, her silhouette caught in the soft glow of the hearth. Her skin gleamed like polished amber. When she turned, startled, he saw fear in her eyes. "Forgive me, sir," she whispered, bowing her head. "I came for water for Miss Jenna." James stood there longer than necessary, studying her. He cleared his throat. "There is nothing to forgive. This house is as much yours as it is mine." Light. But it felt good to say. Tina glanced up, confused, but nodded. Her voice barely a murmur. "Thank you, sir." He asked her name. Tina Giada. The name lingered in the room, floating between them like steam from the kettle. Something about the way she said it, with no accent, no pretension, only quiet strength, unsettled him. When she slipped away into the darkness, James remained, one hand on the counter, breathing deeply. He hadn't felt that kind of stillness in 5 years. Not since Margaretha's laughter filled this house. The next morning, James watched from the study window as Tina walked through the garden, a tray in her hands, her steps measured. The wind teased her curls into the sunlight. Jenna stood nearby, barking orders, throwing petals at her. James should have looked away. But he didn't. He told himself it was concern for the girl's welfare, the cruelty of his children. But the tightness in his chest told another story. Something was unfolding inside him, unexpected and unwelcome. That night, as thunder rumbled on the horizon, he found himself thinking of her eyes, not as a master, not as a grieving man, but as someone who had, for a moment, seen the world breathe again. In the days that followed, James tried to convince himself that his concern for Tina was nothing more than a sense of decency. He began rising earlier, lingering in the corridors where her chores often led her, carrying fresh linens up the staircase, scrubbing the wooden floors of the veranda, or feeding the hens at the edge of the orchard. Their interactions remained brief, almost formal. "Good morning, Miss Tina," he'd say, with a gentle tip of the head. She would bow slightly, responding with a soft, "Mr. Callahan." But the tension between them shimmered like the fog over Greenfield's lower valley, present and quietly alive. At night, James stood before his fireplace longer than usual, gazing at the flickering flames as if searching for Margaretha's approval, or perhaps forgiveness, for what he was beginning to feel. Jenna, however, remained blissfully unaware of the growing gravity inside her father. For her, Tina was still nothing more than an accessory, a talking doll to parade before guests or torment during idle hours. One afternoon, she brought home a bundle wrapped in brown paper. "Try this on," she demanded, tossing it at Tina, who caught it awkwardly. Inside was a yellow floral dress, modest but clearly crafted by a skilled seamstress. "You look like a beggar in those rags," Jenna said, circling her. "If you're going to be my personal maid, you should at least look presentable." Tina hesitated, unsure whether it was a trap. But that night, after bathing in the servants' quarters, she put it on. The dress clung gently to her frame, highlighting the smooth curve of her shoulders and the rich contrast of her skin against the pale fabric. When she stepped into the parlor to deliver Jenna's evening tea, the room fell silent. Bruce stopped mid-sentence, his glass hovering near his mouth. Jenna smirked. But James could not speak. The sight of her in that dress, her posture tentative yet proud, caught something in his chest and twisted it. She stood in the center of the room like a poem written in breath. "Tea, Miss Jenna," Tina said quietly. Jenna took it without a word, her eyes darting toward her father, then to her brother. The silence lingered a beat too long before Tina bowed and retreated. That night James could not sleep. He walked the halls until morning, haunted by beauty and guilt in equal measure. On the porch, under the soft amber glow of the gas lanterns, Bruce and Jenna exchanged glances. "Did you see how he looked at her?" Jenna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Bruce nodded, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "She's got his attention," he said. "We need to watch that." For the first time, their laughter was absent. It was not amusement they felt now, but something colder. Contempt, disgust, or fear of losing control over the man who funded their whims. "She's a servant," Jenna hissed. He'd never. But Bruce was not so sure. He had seen that look before, in men at the tavern drunk on longing and regret. And James Callaghan, for all his wealth, had been starving for something for years. The next morning, Tina found herself summoned to the study. Her hands were damp with nerves as she entered, head bowed. James stood by the window, back to her. "Sit, please," he said, voice low. She obeyed, perching lightly on the edge of the chair. "How have they been treating you?" he asked. A pause. Lying felt safer. "Fine, sir." But James turned, meeting her gaze. "Tina, I see the bruises. I hear the laughter when you walk away." Her eyes dropped to her lap. He stepped closer, hesitated. "You don't deserve that," she whispered. "Thank you." A tear clung to her lash but did not fall. "I don't know what I can do yet," James added. "But I won't allow this cruelty to continue." That evening, Tina stood by the garden's edge, watching the sunset melt over the hills in hues of gold and rust. James joined her quietly. "This was Margaretha's favorite view," he said. "She'd hum little tunes and talk to the wind." Tina looked up at him, surprised. He continued, "I loved her deeply. And yet, when I see you, Tina, I remember what it's like to feel awake again." She didn't speak. Words would have betrayed her. Her heart raced in her chest like wild horses. He didn't touch her, didn't overstep. But in that silence, they both knew something fragile and forbidden had begun to bloom. Something no law, no bloodline, no cruelty could erase. In the days that followed, James tried to convince himself that his concern for Tina was nothing more than a sense of decency. He began rising earlier, lingering in the corridors where her chores often led her, carrying fresh linens up the staircase, scrubbing the wooden floors of the veranda, or feeding the hens at the edge of the orchard. Their interactions remained brief, almost formal. "Good morning, Miss Tina," he'd say, with a gentle tip of the head. She would bow slightly, responding with a soft "Mr. Callaghan." But the tension between them shimmered like the fog over green fields' lower valley, present and quietly alive. At night, James stood before his fireplace longer than usual, gazing at the flickering flames as if searching for Margaretha's approval, or perhaps forgiveness, for what he was beginning to feel. Jenna, however, remained blissfully unaware of the growing gravity inside her father. For her, Tina was still nothing more than an accessory, a talking doll to parade before guests or torment during idle hours. One afternoon, she brought home a bundle wrapped in brown paper. "Try this on," she demanded, tossing it at Tina, who caught it awkwardly. Inside was a yellow floral dress, modest but clearly crafted by a skilled seamstress. "You look like a beggar in those rags," Jenna said, circling her. "If you're going to be my personal maid, you should at least look presentable." Tina hesitated, unsure whether it was a trap. But that night, after bathing in the servants' quarters, she put it on. The dress clung gently to her frame, highlighting the smooth curve of her shoulders and the rich contrast of her skin against the pale fabric. When she stepped into the parlor to deliver Jenna's evening tea, the room fell silent. Bruce stopped mid-sentence, his glass hovering near his mouth. Jenna smirked. But James could not speak. The sight of her in that dress, her posture tentative yet proud, caught something in his chest and twisted it. She stood in the center of the room like a poem written in breath. "Tea, Miss Jenna," Tina said quietly. Jenna took it without a word, her eyes darting toward her father, then to her brother. The silence lingered a beat too long before Tina bowed and retreated. That night James could not sleep. He walked the halls until morning, haunted by beauty and guilt in equal measure. On the porch, under the soft amber glow of the gas lanterns, Bruce and Jenna exchanged glances. "Did you see how he looked at her?" Jenna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Bruce nodded, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "She's got his attention," he said. "We need to watch that." For the first time, their laughter was absent. It was not amusement they felt now, but something colder. Contempt, disgust, or fear of losing control over the man who funded their whims. "She's a servant," Jenna hissed. He'd never. But Bruce was not so sure. He had seen that look before, in men at the tavern drunk on longing and regret. And James Callaghan, for all his wealth, had been starving for something for years. The next morning, Tina found herself summoned to the study. Her hands were damp with nerves as she entered, head bowed. James stood by the window, back to her. "Sit, please," he said, voice low. She obeyed, perching lightly on the edge of the chair. "How have they been treating you?" he asked. A pause. Lying felt safer. "Fine, sir." But James turned, meeting her gaze. "Tina, I see the bruises. I hear the laughter when you walk away." Her eyes dropped to her lap. He stepped closer, hesitated. "You don't deserve that," she whispered. "Thank you." A tear clung to her lash but did not fall. "I don't know what I can do yet," James added. "But I won't allow this cruelty to continue." That evening, Tina stood by the garden's edge, watching the sunset melt over the hills in hues of gold and rust. James joined her quietly. "This was Margaretha's favorite view," he said. "She'd hum little tunes and talk to the wind." Tina looked up at him, surprised. He continued, "I loved her deeply. And yet, when I see you, Tina, I remember what it's like to feel awake again." She didn't speak. Words would have betrayed her. Her heart raced in her chest like wild horses. He didn't touch her, didn't overstep. But in that silence, they both knew something fragile and forbidden had begun to bloom. Something no law, no bloodline, no cruelty could erase. Tell us in the comments where you're watching this story from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. No one spoke openly of the change, but it rippled through green field like wind under a locked door. The kitchen staff began whispering, glancing toward the staircases with eyes wide and mouths tight. The gardener, old Mr. Hemsley, muttered beneath his breath, "The master's got stars in his eyes again." Rumors spread like ivy, coiling around every idle corner, that the young maid had cast a spell, that James was losing his mind, that Margaretha's ghost would soon rise and take vengeance. Tina heard none of it directly, but she felt it. In the way the maids paused when she entered a room, in the longer silences at dinner, in the increasing distance Jenna placed between them. One evening, while Tina served soup, Jenna took the spoon from her hand and dropped it with a clang to the floor. "Clumsy thing," she snapped. Tina bent to retrieve it. Bruce watched her with narrowed eyes, the shadows on his face darker than the firelight. James, unaware of the full venom building in his children, began to take bold steps. He asked Tina to read to him in the study, claiming Margareth used to do the same. The first night she declined. The second she obeyed. Her voice, soft but steady, filled the oak-paneled room as she read passages from old poetry books. Keats, Byron, and once, at James's request, a letter Margareth had written years before their marriage. "You make me feel like the world is quiet enough to breathe in again," Tina read aloud, her eyes flicking up to see James staring not at the page, but at her. "Do you understand what that means?" he asked. She nodded. "I think I do." His hands trembled, not from fear, but from knowing he was walking to the edge of a precipice, and not caring if he fell. When she left the room that night, his fingertips still tingled where they had brushed hers by accident. The house changed subtly. Tina was given more responsibilities but fewer punishments. She was permitted to eat after the family, not in the servants' corridor but in the warm side room near the library. She was allowed fresh linens, better shoes. To some it was nothing. To the others it was everything. Jenna's jealousy turned acidic. She began plotting small cruelties again, spilling ink on Tina's clothes, ordering her to clean the chimney flues, replacing her soap with lye. But Tina never complained. She bore each indignity with grace, and James noticed. One day he took Jenna aside. "Why do you treat her this way?" he demanded. Jenna smirked. "Why do you care?" That silence spoke volumes. She stared at her father for a beat too long and said, "You shame Mother's memory." James turned away without reply. But his shoulders sagged under the weight of truth he could no longer deny. A storm arrived 2 nights later. Heavy rain battered the estate, and thunder cracked the sky like a whip. The house shuddered in its foundation. Servants rushed to shutter the windows, but a tree limb crashed into the upper floor, damaging the roof above Jenna's room. She had to be moved. Tina offered to sleep in the linen closet so Jenna could use her small quarters in the servants' wing. James opposed it. "She's not to be displaced," he said sternly. "Have Jenna sleep in the drawing room. It's warm and the couches are fine." The declaration was final, and Jenna's eyes filled with a rage that rivaled the lightning outside. That night, as the wind howled and the estate groaned, James passed Tina in the hallway. They didn't speak, but in their brief glance was 1,000 unspoken truths. "We are not safe, but we are seen." Bruce, always more calculating than his sister, began digging. He visited town under the guise of errands and paid a man to search Tina's past. "Who was she before she was ours?" he demanded. The answer came back in the form of a letter. Her father had been a free blacksmith, her mother a midwife. Both educated, both dead. Tina had once known comfort. Bruce's eyes narrowed as he reread the note. "So she thinks she's better than us," he muttered. But it wasn't that. Tina never sought superiority, only dignity. Still, Bruce twisted the truth in his mind. He began whispering to the townsfolk, suggesting Tina had seduced James with charms, that she practiced dark arts, that soon she would inherit everything. "The estate must be protected," he said to anyone who would listen, "before it's too late." The poison spread. On a quiet Sunday morning, James announced a chapel service to honor Margaretha's memory. The whole house attended. Tina wore the yellow dress again, now slightly faded but still elegant. She sat at the back, head bowed. James read from the Psalms, his voice breaking at times. When the final hymn ended, he turned to the congregation of family and staff. "I have been a widower for years," he said, "and though grief never truly fades, love has returned to my house in a new form." A ripple of confusion swept the room. James's voice did not tremble. "Tina Giada has reminded me what it means to live with honor, with empathy, with light." Jenna rose, nearly knocking over the pew. "You can't be serious," she spat. But James faced her calmly. "I've never been more certain." Tina stared at her hands, pulse thundering in her ears. She was no longer invisible. She was a storm. That night, the estate was silent save for the soft hum of crickets. James sat alone in the study, staring at the empty hearth. Footsteps approached. Tina entered, hesitant, eyes searching his. "You shouldn't have said that," she murmured. "They'll never forgive you." James looked up, his expression unguarded. "They don't have to," he said. "But I won't hide behind their hate anymore." She moved closer. "I don't know what this is or what it can be," she whispered. "But I know it's real." He reached for her hand, not with hunger but with reverence. "Then let it be real, no matter what it costs." Outside, the wind calmed. The moon rose above green field like a pale witness to something sacred. And inside, two broken souls dared to believe they could be whole again, not as master and servant, but simply as man and woman, hearts beating in rhythm at last. The days after the chapel service were marked by an eerie calm, as if the estate itself was holding its breath. Jenna's eyes burned with silent rage, but Bruce had gone quiet, lurking like a predator waiting to strike. The household staff whispered of change, some hopeful, others fearful. Tina found herself caught in a strange new balance. No longer merely a servant, yet not quite family. She moved through the halls with cautious confidence, her every step measured, her every glance sharp. James watched her closely, a silent guardian whose protection was both shield and chain. At night, when the house slept, Tina sat by the window, tracing the constellations, wondering if freedom was something she could ever truly grasp. Her past weighed heavy, memories of stolen moments with her mother, laughter under open skies, a life that felt like a distant dream. Yet here, in this old estate full of secrets and sorrow, she was forging a new existence. Fragile, uncertain, but hers. Jenna's resentment deepened, poisoning her words and actions. She staged small rebellions, refusing to attend lessons, spreading rumors about Tina, and once, sabotaging the garden where Tina worked. One morning, Tina found rows of freshly planted herbs trampled, petals crushed under heavy boots. When she confronted Jenna, the girl laughed cruelly. "You think you belong here. You're just a shadow, a ghost of something you'll never have." Tina clenched her fists but said nothing. She knew that endurance was her weapon now, the silent defiance that no lash could break. Bruce watched these encounters with growing irritation. He was biding his time, waiting for the perfect moment to unleash his own cruelty, more calculated, more devastating. The tension in the house was like a taut wire, humming with potential energy. James tried to maintain order but was visibly torn. His visits to the town became more frequent, seeking solace in old friends and familiar faces. Yet each time he returned, his gaze lingered longer on Tina, his heart a battlefield of duty and desire. One evening after a heavy rain, he found her in the garden, hands deep in the soil, planting seeds for the next season. The rain had soaked her dress, clinging to her like a second skin. "You're growing something beautiful here," he said softly. Tina looked up, surprise flickering in her eyes. "Not everything here is ruined," she replied. Their shared silence spoke volumes, of wounds healing, of trust building, of something tender blossoming in the cracks of old pain. But even as hope took root, the shadows of jealousy and betrayal crept closer. Bruce's plan unfolded like a dark flower. He met with a stranger from town, a man with sharp eyes and sharper knives, promising gold in exchange for a secret that could destroy Tina. The details were whispered in dark alleys, a plot woven with lies and fear. Jenna, blinded by envy, unwittingly aided the scheme, feeding Bruce information about Tina's routines and habits. One night, the stranger appeared near the estate's boundary, lurking in the shadows with malicious intent. Tina sensed something wrong but couldn't pinpoint it until the final moment. A struggle ensued in the moonlight. Shouts echoed, footsteps pounded, and a knife flashed. James arrived just in time, driving the attacker away with a fierce roar that shook the night. The household woke to chaos, and for the first time, Tina felt the full weight of danger lurking just beneath the surface of their fragile peace. After the attack, James insisted Tina stay within the main house, forbidding her to venture beyond the gardens alone. His protective presence was both comforting and suffocating. He began confiding in her more revealing memories of Margareth. Her laughter, her kindness, her tragic end. Tina listened, her heart aching with empathy. She shared stories of her own past, of love lost and hopes deferred. Their connection deepened, transcending the roles of master and servant, becoming a fragile friendship built on honesty and shared pain. Jenna seethed, watching this bond grow, feeling herself slipping further into isolation. Her bitterness turned to desperation. One evening, she confronted Tina in the servants' quarters, voice trembling with rage and fear. "You think you can take everything from me? You'll see. This house will burn, and you'll be the ashes." Tina did not respond. Instead, she turned away, her silence a quiet storm. She understood the darkness within Jenna, born of loss and entitlement, but she refused to be consumed by it. Instead, she focused on survival, on carving out a space where she could breathe and dream. James, meanwhile, wrestled with his conscience and his desires. He knew the risks of his growing affection for Tina, the ruin it could bring to his family name. Yet each time she smiled, each time their fingers brushed, the old grief softened, replaced by a fragile hope. The estate stood on the edge of transformation, a place where love and hate, cruelty and kindness, collided in violent harmony. And at the center, Tina and James danced a delicate dance, neither knowing where it would end, only that it was real, and it was theirs. The world outside Greenfield moved on, oblivious to the quiet revolutions taking place within its walls. But within the house, every glance, every word, every breath carried weight. The past pressed down like a shroud, but the future whispered promises in the wind. Tina felt the stirrings of change, the possibility of freedom not just in body but in spirit. She no longer dreamed of escape but of transformation. And as autumn deepened into winter, with the first frost glittering on the windows, the house waited, holding its breath for the storm that was sure to come. Winter arrived like a silent thief, cloaking Greenfield Estate in icy stillness, where the cold seeped through stone walls and settled in hearts. Tina moved with quiet grace through the dim corridors, the weight of heavy woolen skirts a constant reminder of her place, between servitude and something unspoken. The fire crackled in the hearth, but no warmth could thaw the tension growing inside the house. Jenna, now colder than the frost outside, paced the hallways with eyes sharp as icicles, plotting and brooding over her fading power. Bruce, silent but watchful, grew restless, his impatience a tinderbox ready to ignite. Meanwhile, James found solace in late-night walks by the frozen river, his breath misting in the frigid air as he wrestled with forbidden feelings. Tina watched from the shadows, her heart torn between hope and despair, knowing that every stolen moment could shatter the fragile peace. The servants whispered of secrets and betrayals in hushed tones, fearing the inevitable storm. Tina's quiet strength was both admired and feared. She had become a symbol of resilience in a world designed to crush her. Her hands, once trembling, now moved with purpose, mending torn garments, preparing meals, and tending to the sick with a gentle touch that softened even Mrs. Redden's vinegar stare. The garden lay dormant under snow, but Tina dreamed of spring, of new life breaking through the frozen ground, just as she hoped for a future where chains would fall away. Her nights were haunted by memories of her mother's lullabies, the soft hum of hope and love that refused to die. She clung to these fragments like lifelines, even as Jenna's venomous whispers tried to poison her resolve. James grew bolder in his affection, though always careful to hide it beneath a veneer of propriety. He sought Tina's company under the guise of discussing estate matters, but their conversations meandered through laughter, shared sorrow, and whispered dreams. One evening, as snowflakes drifted lazily outside the study window, their hands brushed over a ledger, sending sparks of electricity through the chill. The world beyond the walls seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them suspended in a fragile bubble of warmth. Yet, with every tender glance, James felt the weight of judgment pressing down, a reminder of the walls he could not yet tear down. Tina, sensing his conflict, offered silent support, her presence a balm to his weary soul, even as the shadow of scandal loomed close. Jenna's rage morphed into reckless desperation. She confided in Bruce her plans to expose Tina's past, hoping to shatter the fragile trust growing between Tina and James. Bruce, hungry for control, saw this as his opportunity to strike. Together, they plotted to forge letters and spread rumors, whispering poison in the ears of townfolk and servants alike. The web of deceit thickened, ensnaring the innocent and guilty in its snare. Tina's world narrowed to survival, each day a battle against invisible enemies lurking in smiles and sidelong glances. But even in the darkest moments, she found unexpected allies. quiet souls who recognized her strength and dared to dream of justice. Their small acts of rebellion, shared glances, hidden notes, and clandestine meetings were sparks that threatened to ignite a blaze. James confronted Jenna after overhearing a whispered accusation, his voice cold and unwavering. "Enough," he declared, his gaze piercing. The household fell silent, the tension breaking like a snapped chain. Jenna's facade cracked, revealing raw fear beneath the bitterness. For the first time, she saw not a master, but a man torn between duty and heartache, fighting for what he believed was right. Her defiance faltered, replaced by a flicker of regret and confusion. Bruce, seeing his sister's weakness, clenched his fists but remained silent, his game far from over. James turned to Tina, his eyes softening. "We will face this together," he promised, offering a fragile shield against the storm. Tina nodded, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. The estate braced for the inevitable reckoning. Winter's grip tightened, snowstorms howling like ghosts outside the heavy windows. Inside, the battle for freedom, love, and justice raged in whispers and stolen moments. Tina's resolve hardened, her spirit unyielding as she prepared for whatever fate awaited. The bond between her and James, once a fragile thread, grew stronger, a lifeline in the swirling darkness. Jenna's machinations, though vicious, only revealed the depth of pain behind her cruelty, a pain born of loss, envy, and shattered dreams. And so, the stage was set for a confrontation that would change everything, where the past and future collided in a violent, beautiful dance, and where the true nature of love would be tested beyond all limits. The sun had barely risen over Riverfield when the first murmurs of rebellion stirred among the townsfolk. Whispers of scandal and scandalous love rippled through the streets like wildfire, igniting fury and fear alike. James Callaghan, once a man shackled by tradition and the harsh legacy of his family, now found himself at the center of a storm he had never anticipated. His marriage to Tina Giada, the woman who had been his daughter's slave, challenged not only his own heart but the rigid walls of a society unwilling to accept change. Each day brought fresh battles, glances laced with contempt, rumors like daggers aimed to wound his family's name, and threats whispered under breath in the shadows of the Greenfield estate. Yet in the midst of this upheaval, James's resolve hardened, fueled by a love that refused to be extinguished by prejudice or power. Tina, once a frightened girl shackled by chains not only physical but emotional, blossomed into a woman of fierce grace and quiet strength. The yellow floral dress that Jenna had once purchased for her to flaunt her status became a symbol not of ownership but of transformation. She navigated the treacherous waters of her new life with dignity, confronting scorn with a gaze that dared anyone to challenge her worth. The nights spent in whispered conversations with James, away from prying eyes, revealed a tenderness and understanding that neither had known was possible. Their love, forged in secret moments and tempered by hardship, became a beacon of hope. But the shadows of Bruce and Jenna loomed large, plotting, scheming to tear apart what they deemed unnatural, their cruelty escalating with each passing day. One evening, under a sky swollen with storm clouds, Bruce stormed into the estate with plans to sell Tina to the highest bidder in a desperate attempt to reclaim control. The confrontation was fierce and raw, Bruce's rage clashing violently against James's quiet but unwavering defiance. In that charged moment, years of pain and loss converged. James, who had buried his dreams with Margareth, now fought fiercely for a future reborn. With a voice steady and resolute, he declared Tina not property but his equal, his partner, and the mother of his child. The auction was cancelled, the deal broken, but the scars of betrayal and hatred ran deep. Tina's heart raced as she realized the full weight of the battle ahead. Yet in James's eyes she found a sanctuary, a promise that together they would endure. The town's judgment was swift and merciless. Letters scrawled with venom were delivered to the estate. Church doors whispered condemnations, and neighbors turned their backs. Yet, in the eye of this storm, James and Tina's bond only grew stronger, their love a quiet rebellion against the cruelty of the world. Their wedding, held in the small chapel hidden within the estate's woods, was a fragile yet radiant act of defiance. Surrounded by the few who dared to celebrate with them, they vowed to face whatever darkness awaited with unyielding hearts. The birth of their son, Colin, sealed their promise. He was not only heir to the Callaghan legacy but a living symbol of hope, change, and the power of love that crosses all divides. Bruce and Jenna's exile to Scotland was both punishment and opportunity, a chance to escape the weight of their family's disgrace and forge a new path far from Riverfield's unforgiving gaze. Though bitterness lingered, the removal of their cruel influence allowed the estate to breathe again. James and Tina, united in purpose and passion, began the slow work of healing the wounds inflicted by generations. Together, they transformed Greenfield from a fortress of oppression into a home where hope could take root. The laughter of their son echoed through the halls once heavy with silence, and the harsh winter that had gripped Riverfield for so long gave way to the warm embrace of spring. In the quiet moments before dawn, James often found himself watching Tina as she tended the garden. Her silhouette bathed in moonlight, a living testament to resilience and love. Their journey, marked by pain, sacrifice, and courage, was far from over, but the promise of tomorrow shimmered brighter than ever. For in a world bent on division, their story stood as a testament to the unyielding power of love, a force that could shatter chains, heal wounds, and change the course of history. And as the first rays of sunlight kissed the fields of Greenfield Estate, it was clear that this was not just an ending, but the beginning of a legacy written in the hearts of those who dared to dream.